Hi everyone and welcome to today's quick fix. Now I do videos on water control and things, but a lot of you are still quite concerned about knowing how much water to use. So I thought we'd do just a really simple experiment today. So I'll just move that paint out of the way and I'll put the jar of water in shot. Okay, I've got a size 4 brush, which is just a really useful one for experimenting with. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at proportions of water to paint. Okay, so we're going to start over this side, and I've got a wet brush and I have got 100% water, no paint. Okay, so we see no colour on the page unless you had a dirty brush, which there's a little bit of colour on there. There's always a little bit of colour. And what we're going to do is, you can see my permanent rose is already a little bit woken up. So I suppose the first thing to say is your brush should always have been dipped in the water and at least sort of wiped off on the rim to begin with, just so the paint will actually run off it. And also, your paint should have at least been woken up a little bit. And what I mean by that is we're just running a wet brush over the top of the paint just to sort of get it a little bit woken up. Okay, so if we're starting from the beginning, water, no colour, it's going to make a clear bit on the page. If I go water and one sort of stroke of the colour in the palette. Now notice that I did not pick up the colour from the actual blob of colour here. What you want to get more control, either you have a little space in the well of your palette here, or you could put it into here so you've got a clear space, but essentially one stroke of colour. Now what you'll see here is immediately trying to do even proportions of water to colour isn't always going to work. You're going to need a bit more water each time to get a nice smooth flow on the page. So that's the first thing, is water really is the more important element when it comes to watercolor painting. So we go in again. So in that case we need to make sure our brush is really nice and wet, and this time I'm going to pick up a little bit more color on the brush, and instead of just like going in loads of times, it's more about getting the bristles a bit more fully coated in the color. And this time, oh, that's an awful lot. So we've got a massive change just from adding a little bit more colour onto the brush. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that it is very hard to fully control how much paint you're suddenly going to have on the page. And so the best bit of advice I can give to you when people who worry about how much water to colour ratio they do is to have a piece of scrap paper to one side as alongside your main painting. And so every time you get your water, you get your brush wet in the water, you pick up a bit of colour, you've sort of done it all correctly and everything, and then you put it on your page and you're like, whoa, that's loads more colour than I thought. If you've done it on your scrap bit of paper first, then you're not going to run any risk of ruining your piece by putting on a way too bold bit of colour. But what I will say now is we've got this bit of colour on our page, it's a bit wet. By cleaning off my brush entirely, or as much as possible, and just having it wet, I can now stretch that out and fade it if need be. I was fast enough to make sure that this colour hadn't dried completely to the page and would be very stubborn to try and sort of stretch out. But you see here, by adding just a bit of water, you can make that colour go a bit further and also fade a bit. However, what you don't want to do is be rubbing the colour and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and coming in with loads of water, and eventually you'll be sort of making the paper really start to sort of become very loaded with water and buckle. And even though watercolour paper is really sturdy and wonderful, and it won't bobble up unless you're really scraping away, but it's going to really sort of knock the vibrance out of the colour if you are just going back and forth with your brush, back and forth with your brush. And instead of getting a nice even blend like this, you're going to get strange kind of dull blends. When it dries, it's not going to look so happy. So to just go over the basics, always have your brush wetted in the jar and sort of wipe it off on the rim like that before you do anything. The other thing is to make sure your paint is woken up. So with that wet brush, you just want to sort of run a bit of water over the colour like that. Always be cleaning off your brush in between things if you want to sort of start back from scratch with the colour, and just have yourself a piece of scrap paper on the side of your painting so that you can test out how much colour you want on your brush. So I'm just sort of trying to remove colour each time, and you see there's still colour on the brush. Watercolour is such a strong, vibrant thing. Aha, there we go. It's getting right down to nothing. So I hope that is helpful. Have a piece of scrap paper to one side, and if in doubt, clean your brush right off and just work with what you've got on the page. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.